Okay, I just saw a fucking moose. Literally right there. It was fucking huge. Holy fucking shit. Okay. To get the fuck out of here. So let's talk a bit about one of my favorite topics, which is the ego. Now, while certainly this isn't something that's limited to musicians or artists or creative types, we tend to have the most trouble with this because we have a tremendous drive and urge to pursue our creative endeavors. And that kind of a life force, so to speak, can be very, very difficult to manage compared to someone who doesn't necessarily have those sort of grandiose dreams and aspirations. There are many, many things I want to talk about in terms of the ego, but in this video, I want to focus on reframing how we think about the ego. For a lot of people, there seems to be a strong negative connotation to the word. And I certainly didn't have a very refined or mature or healthy relationship with that word. Now, to get to the gist of it, the ego on its own isn't a bad thing. It's only when it goes unchecked, when you don't keep it in check, when you don't audit it, when you don't police it. That's when it starts doing its own thing and goes too far. Your ego is where your motivations come from, where your dreams come from, where your aspiration comes from, where your driven qualities to do things come from. And those are all great things. All healthy individuals, especially artists and creative types, need a healthy ego. And I think that's precisely what a lot of musicians struggle with. There's too much of it, or rather, not too much of it, but it's not balanced by an attending responsibility. You can't just be full of dreams and aspirations and drive. It needs to be balanced by an attending responsibility to actually make something of it, so that you can actually start to manifest those powers into something concrete. It's only a matter of mentoring and cultivating the ego into something more constructive. And I understand where that negative connotation comes from, because there's really nothing more unattractive than an egoistic individual, someone so completely self-absorbed that they don't pay attention to the actual world around them. There's certainly no short supply of people who have too much ego and nothing to balance it out. And it's pretty evident if you go on social media that this is the case. So this video isn't certainly for everyone, but for those of you who struggle with expressing yourself and pursuing your ambitions and your dreams and desires, whenever there's a feeling or an energy or a drive or a motivation to do something, if you find yourself often shutting yourself down before that's allowed to manifest into anything, then there's a good chance that you don't have a healthy relationship with your ego. You know, I used to be extremely disconnected from my ego. Music was really the only place where I would display some of that drive and some of that positive force that moves things forward. Creative stuff was my thing, but I was extremely imbalanced. So whenever it would have been necessary and completely appropriate to display more of it, to allow some of that to come forth, I would completely shut it down, push it aside. And with things where I should have probably pushed on the brakes a bit more, I didn't. I would just fly off into the stratosphere and just go off rails, really not being in a balanced, healthy place. So there needs to be a balance. You know, we human beings have all sorts of different seeming dichotomies within us, all sorts of different opposing or seemingly opposing forces that dwell inside of us. And it's not as simple as good or bad. They both have their own merit and they both play their own integral parts. And I hope we can stop looking at these things in a binary fashion. So my invitation to you is, the next time you get hit in the face because you dared to follow something that was driven by the positive forces of your ego, please stop and don't make the mistake of interpreting that as being a fault of the ego. It was really the failure of all the other things that are meant to balance out and keep that ego in check that failed you. So please don't see the ego as the enemy. It's a very positive and necessary force in life because it drives things forward. It drives the products of the soul to come forth and do their thing. Once you have a more healthy relationship with your ego, things become great because you can simultaneously think the best of yourself and support yourself to do your best, but also know very well that you're never too far away from being an absolute piece of shit. And that's a very good place to be, indeed. Finished.